So me and Sonny, we went through and rated the top 10 Big Ten rivalries. We agreed in some areas. We disagreed in a few other areas. We both have Oregon and Washington in our top 5. Both have Michigan versus Ohio State as our number 1 rivalry. Illinois versus Northwestern, we both have as number 10. You were much higher on, or I apologize, I was much higher on Minnesota versus Wisconsin, having them, or not much higher, but I was a couple spots higher on Minnesota versus Wisconsin. And then you had Ohio State versus Penn State, which is not recognized by the Big Ten as a rivalry, but you're putting them on there. Tell me, let's start with that. Tell me, why did you have Ohio State versus Penn State, even though they're not a rivalry to the Big Ten? Why did you have them at number 9 on your list?
Just because for the last decade, the game has mattered, even though Penn State, for the most part, hasn't been able to come out victorious, especially in that gauntlet of a Big Ten East. There's 2 games that mattered. That was Ohio State, Michigan. 3 games: Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan, Penn State, and Penn State, Ohio State. And so just because of that, really, because once you get that low on the list, I mean, I'm not even sure if I just put Illinois Northwestern in there just because I'm an Illinois guy and I wanted some sort of presence. The games at the end, I think you can mix and match. And so for me, it was just pure like every time Ohio State and Penn State played, it usually meant it could mean for the conference. And so for that reason, that's why I have it up there as a rivalry.
Yeah, I was tempted to put it up there. The fact that it wasn't recognized by the Big Ten, I was kind of like, should I put it up there? But at the end of the day, like it was fringe top 10 for me. So I can't really disagree with it. Illinois versus Northwestern. I think this is a rivalry that people aren't as familiar with. I think they should be, because it is one of the longest lasting rivalries in the Big Ten, 117 meetings between the two schools. I know that Illinois Purdue is kind of turning into a little bit of a rivalry with, I think it's the Purdue Cannon Trophy or something like that, that they have between the two of them. I've always felt like that's more of kind of a basketball rivalry, whether the two schools will admit it, that they're rivals or not. So for me, for football,
there's no two schools that are closer mileage wise than Illinois and Purdue. So like Illinois,
wait, USC, UCLA, are they closer?
Oh, I guess now things might be different.
They might be the only one though. Yeah, and obviously that just started this year. So the vicinity of the two schools, of course, in basketball, it's becoming more. Well, only one side acknowledges that it's a rivalry; the other side doesn't acknowledge it as a rivalry. But the fan base is Penn State a little bit.
yeah, maybe. But I mean, you guys have won more than Purdue basketball. But regardless, it's I think the vicinity. A lot of my brother went to Purdue, so it's like a lot of families get kind of split up between the two universities. And Illinois doesn't really, outside Northwestern, who for the most part of their career, has struggled when it comes to football. Before really Gary Barnett got there, and then obviously, the recent run that they had, they were historically one of the worst programs in all of college football. So Illinois has just always kind of been middling around, trying to find someone to build a rivalry with. And so I think Purdue by default almost has been a game that we look forward to. I agree, not as much on the football side, but now that they got Ryan Walters, our former defensive coordinator, we're kind of recruiting after the same guys. I can see things getting fired up again.
Yeah, and I think, talking to Illinois fans, you being one of them, knowing the guys over at I forget the name of their podcast, the Pirate
Javaman.
Illinois.
Javaman.
Yeah. Javaman. Thank you. The Javaman, I remember I had one of them on, I think it was Java. I can't remember. Terrible with memory. But I had one of them on, and it was right after Northwestern lost to Chicago State. And he just railed on Northwestern the entire time. And I had him on after the Illinois Purdue game as well. And, it was just kind of like, good game. They won. Is what it is. And it just felt like the fire was much more against Northwestern in basketball and football, for that matter, than it was kind of against Purdue. So that's one of the reasons why I've ranked Illinois Northwestern above Illinois Purdue. But if I had a Purdue fan or an Illinois fan tell me I hate Purdue more than I hate Illinois or hate Northwestern, I couldn't really argue with them. All right, Sonny, another game that you have much higher than mine. Iowa versus Nebraska. I had Iowa versus Nebraska, number 9. You had Iowa versus Nebraska, number 3. One of the reasons why I did have them lower is they have only met 54 times. This feels kind of like a newer rivalry as the Big West had formed. I know that they obviously were playing before that, but this felt kind of a little bit more revitalized because of that. Now that the Big Ten West is gone, I don't know if the rivalry is going to be the same with them battling in the Big Ten West there. However, you obviously see them as a much higher rivalry than me. What are your thoughts on that rivalry?
Are they a protected rivalry? Nebraska and Iowa moving forward? Are they one of the protected ones? Do you know?
I think so. Iowa's 3 or Nebraska, Wisconsin, and
right.
Minnesota, if I'm not wrong.
So this one actually surprised me too. And I think I've only really appreciated it as a rivalry since I started covering college football. Obviously my partner on Big Ten show, Justin Adams, is a big Nebraska guy. And I don't know, my algorithm at this point, a lot of it is Iowa people, a lot of it is Nebraska people. And those two fan bases genuinely do not like each other. They go at it back and forth a lot. So for me, it's just kind of, like I know their other rivalries are big, like Minnesota, Wisconsin. Minnesota, I think, shows up in a couple different rivalries for me here, but it's not something I've seen personally. And so for that reason, I don't have it quite as high as Iowa and Nebraska, because I don't think one person can post a positive Nebraska video without some Iowa guy in the chat, saying some obscenities, disagreeing with the topic.
Like Justin.
Shout out Justin.
No, Justin would never. I think Iowa, Nebraska, I really struggled with trying to think, like, who does Iowa hate the most? And it almost felt like, and maybe this is just, recency bias, but after this year with the Iowa versus Minnesota fiasco with the fair catch and everything like that, that's the kind of stuff I love in college football. And I came on here after that game and kind of riled up both fan bases and kind of took both sides a little bit and had them both mad at me. But I love that piece of it where the two fan bases, there are just such great moments between the two of them, and those kind of things stick with you. For me, it felt like that. And then obviously Minnesota versus Wisconsin, the longest standing rivalry in the Big Ten, 133 meetings. And on top of that, Wisconsin only leads it by 1, 63-62. And so in that sense, it's like, this has to be one of the best rivalries, if not in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. You play for so long. You're so even between the two of them. Of course, I gave the nod to Michigan versus Ohio State because I do feel like that rivalry oftentimes can decide the Big Ten. I do think the record is a little bit skewed because of stuff that happened before 1920. However, yes, Michigan fan, all those games are valid. It's fine, whatever. I would love rivalries. But at the end of the day, like, I don't think there's any argument Michigan versus Ohio State. That is the best rivalry in the Big Ten. Best rivalry, if not the best, or one of the best in all of college football. And it's one of the best rivalries in all of sports. Do you agree?
Definitely. And I honestly, if I'm going to be straight with you, I think you're really underselling Oregon and Washington too. I think maybe because you haven't really been involved, with that part of the map. But those two fan bases are super passionate, and that rivalry, oh my gosh. Like, if I'm talking about Iowa and Nebraska fans hating each other, Oregon and Washington is at another level. Level similar to what Michigan and Ohio State fans are. They genuinely have a very strong dislike for each other. Their games don't matter as much as the Michigan and Ohio State games, which is why I think Michigan Ohio State probably is the best rivalry in the sport. But when it comes to just pure hatred and what the sense of what a rivalry means, I think Oregon and Washington is right up there with Michigan, Ohio State, with Alabama, Auburn, with all the big rivalries that you think about.
See, Oregon and Washington needs a really cool name for their rivalry. They're like one of the only rivalries that doesn't have a name. I mean, Like, you got the game for Ohio State,
That could
Michigan.
be
You
it.
got Paul Bunyan's axe for Wisconsin, Minnesota. You got all these cool names, and then Oregon versus Washington. That's it.
The
Like,
book for Illinois and Ohio State.
I know, man. We should be talking about how much we hate each other, right? I mean, actually, it's funny. The Illabuck is one of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One of only 9 rivalries that has been played over 100 times in the Big Ten. So, but it didn't get registered as an official rivalry, even though there's a trophy. It didn't get registered as an official rivalry. Do you wish it was a rivalry? Do you wish Ohio State and Illinois played every year?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Thank you. As you
cool
know, my
with
wife's a Buckeye. Yeah, my wife's a Buckeye, and that's one extra loss I'm glad I don't have to deal with on the football field every year.
But imagine when you win, how sweet it would be. I don't know when
it's
going to
happen maybe once or twice. Yeah, exactly. Once or twice in my remaining lifetime. So I'm good. I passed.
I did feel like one more comment on Oregon, Washington, and then we'll move on to the next piece here. But I was glad to see you had Oregon and Washington at number 2 because there was a piece of me that really did want to rate them higher than number 4. But I was like, am I kind of projecting here? Am I being biased because I look at Oregon and Washington and see some of the similarities of Michigan, Ohio State? There's a northern team, there's a southern team. The northern team is a little bit arrogant about their academics and things like that. The southern team is a little bit more arrogant about their sports and looking at it that way. The northern team, they run the rivalry in terms of the all-time record, just like in Michigan, Ohio State. And so I saw some of the similarities there, but I was like, I don't know if I can put, Oregon and Washington number 2 and Ohio State, Michigan number 1, but you did. So made me feel a little bit justified in my thought there.
Yeah, they hate each other.
That they do.